Hello and welcome to another anime lore and theory video. I'm Shergok, your host, and today we are going to take a closer look at the fight of Ainz vs Dragon God Orsted. And this is part 2. But before we're going to take a closer look at any of this, let me quickly thank my Patreons for supporting this channel, as well as say thanks to all users of the YouTube thanks function for making one-time donations. And with that said, spoiler warning for Overlord and Mushoku Tensei, and let's get to the topic at hand. And we're picking up right where we left off in the last part. And again, if you don't know part 1, link and presumably also Zelda is in the description. Ainz buffed himself with everything he had used against Shelter Blood Fallen. Greater Hardening, Penetrate Up, Full Data Life, See-Through, Freedom, and countless other buffs, all stacked one upon another, to significantly enhance his power, while Orsted seemingly did nothing, other than attentively observing the situation, like a Pokémon in the Safari Zone. Because while Ainz might be a disgusting and dangerous undead from his perspective, Orsted studies every spell and every buff very closely, so he can copy them later and make himself even stronger. And while Ainz's observation spells failed, as if Orsted was protected by a word-level anti-intelligence spell, his cold, osprey eyes immediately caught what Ainz was about to do. And he was ready. Call Greater Thunder, Reality Slash, Vermilion Nova, Hold Off Rip. Ainz unleashed an enormous arsenal of his magical power. Some spells hit Orsted partially, some grazed him, some hit right in the middle of his chest, but he skillfully dodged many others until he closed the distance again, now visibly bruised. Fly. Ainz took to the skies once more and continued his barrage of spells. Every status effect was shaken off by the Dragon God, but most spells still had an impact, even if they were just grazing shots. Orsted was bleeding, Orsted was growing weaker, and his clothing was already hanging halfway off his arm. Much like Fluda Paradane once did with the Death Knight, Ainz planned to bombard Orsted from above, to prevent counterattacks. Ainz wanted to drive Orsted before him, or rather the shockwave of his spell Nuclear Blast, were supposed to toss him from point A to point B and weaken him, making it completely impossible for him to ever close the distance. After all, the Overlord had no intention of eliminating him. No, death is a mercy in Nazarick. A mercy Ainz did not intend for Orsted. His body was to be handed over to Demiurge, so he could find the best use for him. Perhaps Demiurge could put him to work on his farm, where the bipedal sheep, let's call it, produce their wool, the supply material for their scrolls. That fraction of a second of distraction was enough for Orsted. With a fly command, he activated a magical necklace that enabled him to fly. And after a failed time spell, the very same artifact that Ainz once used to rise into the sky himself at the beginning of the Overlord anime, now allowed Orsted to effortlessly intercept Ainz mid-air. Even worse, time magic seemingly had no effect either, as he was somehow immune or already trapped in another, much more potent, world-class time spell. And one brutal hand strike to the back of the neck later, Ainz found himself in an impact crater on the ground. Dropping down from the sky, Orsted landed a knee to Ainz's right leg, before Ainz could regain his momentum, shattering it completely. Maximize triple. Another skilled grab snapped Ainz hand like a twig in a storm. Bent out of shape, broken and immobilized, one of his two hands hung limp at the wrist. The next strike was aimed at his head, and only his pain resistance and superhuman senses allowed him to watch as Orsted brushed off his own, seemingly desperation-driven strike to the rib, with his one remaining good hand. Like an elephant shaking off a fly with its flapping ears. And now Orsted prepared for the seemingly decisive blow, aiming directly at the red orb in the center of Ainz chest. Experience seems to guide the Dragon God's hand here, but the railgun-like strike recoiled. His finger broke against the red orb, and Orsted flinched back in pain, astonished by what he had just hit. And this red orb seemed surprisingly effective against the Dragon God, for some reason. Ainz took advantage of the split second of shock. The still active fly spell allowed him to fly away from beneath the Dragon God, and Ainz raised his last good arm to cast the spell that had previously given him the necessary distance, even if it meant inflicting damage on himself this time. He had no choice. He couldn't win a hand-to-hand fight and could only survive for a short time at best in melee. He needed to focus on his strength, the spell casting. Triple maximize wide nuclear blah. Disturb magic. A voice colder and more emotionless than Ainz Ulgun's rang out in his ears before his spell collapsed like a circuit board barrage with buckshot, its mana dissipating harmlessly. In an instant, Orsted was back on top of him. A drop kick slammed the heavily battered body of the Overlord out of the air onto the ground again, and a follow-up punch shattered his shoulder. With the courage of the desperate, Ainz struck Orsted in the rib with his elbow, just before Orsted could completely pin him down to the ground again. This time, it was Orsted who picked up momentum and was thrown several dozen meters away. In a fraction of a second while Orsted was still airborne, Ainz deactivated the perfect warrior mode, casted a gate spell, flew through it, and closed the portal right before Orsted could leap to the other side with him. Ainz's non-existent heart was pounding, his body broken, and in many places looking more than just undead, wanted to bleed but couldn't. Slowly, he sank to the ground, until his servants and floor guardians received him. He felt as though he had fought against Touch Me and lost. For the first time in a long time, rage consumed him. So shortly after Higeran Termite had lied to him about his friends, Ainz saw Touch Me, the man who once saved him, humiliated through this defeat. Furious, he ordered his staff, every means of mana regeneration possible, and a long list of weapons from the deepest reaches of the treasury vault. Albedo, horrified by Ainz Ulgun's condition, asked what had happened, only to receive the response that the honor of Nezarec and his friends was at stake. Ainz ignored the look on Albedo's face, as she seemingly did the look on his own, and then she did what had been requested. Ainz had never won against Touch Me. All he needed to prove to save Touch Me's honor was that he was stronger than Orsted, so that Orsted could not longer compare to Touch Me. And so Ainz used the remaining time that the Dragon God needed to walk at a leisurely pace towards the Grey Tomb to prepare for the second battle. And that brings us to the end of part 2 of the fight between Ainz and Dragon God Orsted. And with that said, now it's your turn. What's your opinion on the topic and the video? Let me know it down in the comments. Who you think will have the upper hand, Orsted or Ainz? Let me know this as well. And while you type, I say thank you very much for watching, thanks to all of my Patreon members for supporting this channel, and as usual, I say my special thanks to Arder Daddy Arder, ASK, Badger Ye, Bad Burrito 316, Beezer, Ben C, Brandon S, Brandon D, Brodo, Chrissy, Crowley 0221, Sia, Crystal Prime, Dead Slime, Death is Mercy, Deathless Dragonlord, Demon Xenomorph 1987, Devin Downen, Ding Dong, Dinpap, Dragonlord Placidus Saxophone, Duckwagon, Dunkler Krieger, Dystopia, Dystopia II, Enigmatic Unicorn, Thiralshivan, Guy with That Head, Hector Marino, Hoss, Huster, Jacob G, Jana B, Jason, J. Morris, Chromius, Kyle R, Lee K. Long, Legendarius, Lelouch Vibetania with a Mustache, Lexus Fox, Lord Nishikian Rai, Lord Touch Me, Lork, Lofrazer, Merovec, Mr. Shoes, Mr. Tweaker, Michael R, Michael Y, Nope, Oh Hell No, Normal Toad, Oh Kill, Overlord General Gasper, Paddy Pantum, Personage, Ruru, Primus 11, Rhinomere, Kyonekerkos P, Shergox's Daddy, Shadow Lightning Wolf, Shrine Keeper, Sir Axolotl, Super Tier Magic Batista Bomb, Supreme Cheese, Staris, Ted, Texas Deer, The Orc Warboss, Rag Edsmesher, T.E. Wang, Vash Hawkeye, Vegito 27, Venture Fanatic, Wilhelm, Zinukai, and Zonagon. Thanks guys. Anyway, have a nice day, and I hope to see you all again soon.